learn that you have not made mistakes, the other where you learn that you know what mistakes you made. So the bad kind of exams are where you are clueless what what went wrong and you don't know about it. So that's the worst kind of exam where you have no idea where did you commit mistakes. So point is you cannot rectify it in the next exam as well. But I hope it went well, right?
It went well, sir.
Great. Okay, so today we'll start with this new chapter, breathing and exchange of gases. This is comparatively a shorter chapter in terms of concepts, major things. Most of the fundamental things you know from your junior classes. And in this chapter, we will be using two terms, breathing and respiration, interchangeably. Though I think that you know what is the difference between the two, but just making you clear that breathing is not the same as respiration, talking biologically, but we often use these words interchangeably. Like when we say respiratory system, we don't say breathing system, we say respiratory system, and we include lungs and everything in it. Whereas I hope you know what is breathing in biology, like what is in true sense breathing means, correct, everyone? So let's first get through this thing. So when we say breathing, strictly and specifically in terms of body physiology, it is the process of inhalation and exhalation, correct? Correct, which means exchange of gases. And which gases specifically? CO2 and oxygen happens between the blood and the lungs. So that's breathing. That's the physical process. And when when we say respiration, then we specifically means cellular respiration, which means breakdown of glucose. So this is glycolysis and breakdown, and this breakdown is oxidative because we use oxygen. So oxidative breakdown of glucose inside cells to produce energy. Is this clear, all of you? Okay, Yusuf, great. So this is what you should know that means. But here when I will saying breathing and exchange of gases in this chapter, we will be using the term breathing interchangeably with respiration. So when I say respiratory system, I mean the breathing system only. We will not go into the um, into the details of cellular metabolism of glucose that takes place in cellular respiration process. Okay, so just remember that. Now just about some fundamental concepts, let's get it cleared first. So what happens in breathing? When we breathe, what happens? Quickly. What happens when we breathe? You all are breathing at the moment, right? What are you doing? Talking from a human perspective, just to make things easy. Iram, why is no one speaking, by the way, today? Decreasing the concentration of O2 from atmosphere. Okay. I think plants are there to restore it back, right? They are putting back oxygen in. So effectively, we are not able to decrease the concentration of oxygen. Though with our activities, we might be able to increase the concentration of CO2, not just by breathing, but by other activities which are human driven, right? So I think, yeah, CO2 release is there. Yeah. We inhale O2 and release CO2. That's what Vazia is saying. That's great. So when we breathe, what's happening is when we are breathing in, are we just breathing in oxygen? Where is the filter in our lungs, or because I think when we breathe in, we just breathe in whatever is available in the air, right? Even if it is a perfume or a deodorant or a bad odor. No, Vazia, you're not audible. Would you like to just tweak with if you're using an earphone or something? It will be great if someone speaks, and mostly people speak, but I don't know what's up today. You're not audible to me, Vazia. Is Vazia audible to anyone? I think she's speaking. She's unmute. Can anyone hear Vazia? Her audio is not connected. Okay, yeah, I think Vazia, because your audio is not connected, I think, but I think it is, isn't it? I can see that Vaziha's audio is connected and is unmute, but I'm not able to hear you, Vazia. Would you like to reconnect back? Yeah, she's speaking. Would you like to reconnect back, Vazia? We can just wait for you. Yeah, I could hear some noise now. If whatever you're doing, if you're tweaking with the earphone, I could hear some. Yeah, we can just wait for you to reconnect. Not a problem. We can just quickly reconnect back. Okay, so in the meanwhile, it's just simple. So when we inhale, so breathing includes two things: inhalation and exhalation. So there are lungs. Okay, let's say there is atmosphere, the environment, and there is blood at the base, okay, inside the body. So from the atmosphere, what we put into lungs is inhalation. From lungs, what we give back to atmosphere is exhalation. So what we breathe in, it contains a mixture of gases: O2, nitrogen, which is N2, oxygen, nitrogen, CO2, everything is there, okay, when we inhale. But what happens is, between our lungs and blood, this exchange only happens between oxygen and CO2. So from lungs to blood, oxygen goes. So blood takes oxygen because oxygen is dissolved in the blood, and there are hemoglobin that binds to oxygen. And from blood to lungs comes specifically CO2. But when we are exhaling, we are mostly exhaling more CO2 plus nitrogen plus some amount of oxygen also goes back, plus other things that are present in the air. So is this part clear to all of you? Okay, yeah, great. Now, talking about what are the organs which are present. Yes, sorry. So quickly, let's talk about respiratory organs. Now, in this, let's first talk about humans. So what are the respiratory organs that we have? How do we breathe? We have lungs, right? We breathe through lungs. But do all organisms breathe through lungs? No, right? If I talk about lower invertebrates, then lungs are not present in lower invertebrates. There we find a variety of ways through which they breathe, starting from diffusion, simple diffusion that happens in sponges, in flatworms, coelentrates. Okay, so their entire body surface just can take oxygen from outside by diffusion. If we talk about earthworms, they have moist skin. Amphibians and earthworms, they can breathe through their moist skin, right? So diffusion, moist skin, they directly absorb oxygen into their body. In insects, which are again invertebrates, in insects we have something called trachea. You know that tracheal system, everyone? So tracheal system are there for breathing, and there's something called book gills which are present in some insects as well, book gills. And third is, if we go to some vertebrates like fish, so in fishes we have gills, right? Instead of lungs we have gills through which they breathe. So here they take in water through their mouth and remove that water through the gills, or it can be otherwise, I'm not very sure, but mostly it's through, when the water moves out or moves in through the gills, there are cells in that gill region that absorbs oxygen from dissolved oxygen from that water. So if you are using lungs, then you are depending on atmospheric gaseous O2 and CO2. Okay, both. If you're using gills, then you are depending on dissolved O2 in water. Okay, in lower invertebrates it can be both, but you know, there are a variety of ways by which basically animals reproduce. So this moist skin one is also known as cutaneous because they are doing it through the skin, so it's called cutaneous respiration. Cutaneous respiration. Okay, this is called tracheal respiration, and where there is specifically there are gills, they are called branchial respiration. Just some terms that you should know. Okay, so about the organs, now we will focus majorly because we are studying human physiology, so we will focus on humans, and in humans we will be focusing on the human respiratory system. So let's quickly come to human respiratory system. So anyone would like to tell me about lungs? What are lungs? Anything basic about lungs? So starting from the beginning, how do we respire? What happens? Anyone who can unmute and speak? I think someone should unmute and speak, otherwise it will be very boring for me to sustain for more than an hour. Okay, but human respiratory system includes, from the top, let's try to draw it. I'm not very good, but you know that how it starts. We start through nostrils. We can also breathe through mouth. Which one is more preferred? Through nostrils, because nose has mucus and fine hairs that filter, kind of, to some extent, they filter the greater impurities which are present in the air. But mouth and nose both meet together in a region which is known as pharynx, right? It's a common passage for food and air. So whether you breathe in through mouth or you breathe in through nose, the air will meet at the pharynx, and from the pharynx the air will go into the lungs. Food will go into the stomach, air will go into the lungs. Sometimes it happens that it's always said that never speak or laugh during eating, because what happens is sometimes if you are laughing, you're short of breath, and then you try to take a deep breath, and by the time you're also trying to engulf the food, or the food is in your mouth somewhere, so some portion of it may accidentally go into the lungs, and it is very, very problematic a situation because that food might contain bacterial particles or an infection, and it can cause infection in the lungs. So body does not want anything apart from air to go into the lungs. Okay, so if anything tries to enter the lungs, you will have a vigorous response of coughing and sneezing. And sometimes, if you have experienced it, then you will know. If you have not experienced it, then very good. But when we are talking or laughing and we get that mistakenly that food tries to enter the windpipe, we sneeze and the food comes out through the nose. It happens, right? So that's where we know that both these systems actually have a common opening, which is called pharynx. So starting with mouth, so I'm not very good with drawing a human system, but that's a very bad one. But let's say this is the nose and this is the mouth. So this is the opening from the mouth, let's say, and this is the opening from the nose. Okay, a human. Both openings come and meet at a common passage known as pharynx. So this part here is pharynx, and from there you go deep inside where your shoulders are kind of, and somewhere here is your epiglottis. Anyone knows what is epiglottis? What is epiglottis? It is a cartilaginous flap. Okay, so this prevents the entry of food into the larynx, which means into the windpipe. So so larynx is also known as the voice box or the sound box. You know that? The Adam's apple in boys, which is a protrusion, it is larynx, it is a voice box. It is also there in females, but not that protruding. It is less protruding, and that makes the difference between a male voice and a female voice. So that's why male voice is more coarser and low pitched, and female voice is more shrill and high pitched because of this sound box or the voice box. Okay, so food should not go into this voice box or any solid particle. So epiglottis, what it does, it's a flap. So it's present at the top between the windpipe and the food pipe, and it covers the windpipe when food is being engulfed or swallowed. Okay, so that's the function of epiglottis. So keep writing these things, and then beneath that we get a larynx, which is a voice box. Okay, known as Adam's apple. From there, from larynx downwards, what starts is your trachea. Okay, and trachea has these half ring like arrangement. So they have rings. It looks like they have rings. Now these trachea diverge into two sides to form bronchus or bronchi. So each is called bronchus. Together these two are called bronchi. So they also have these ring-like structure. Now the upper part of trachea, the larynx, it has the rings there are half. Can anyone tell me why the rings are half there? Think about it and just give me 1 minute. I'll be just back. Okay, just a 1 minute break. Okay, am I audible, everyone, and visible as well? Yes, no? Devangi, Iram, Waziha, Chania, anyone? Yes, okay. Devangi says I am visible. Okay. Yes, so the answer is given by Devangi that this um, trachea, which is the windpipe, is in front, and behind it is the food pipe, which is the esophagus, about which we will study in the digestive system. And sometimes when we eat, we swallow the food as bolus, like big chunks mixed with saliva. So they go as a bolus and they need space to go down. And if these rings, particularly in this region, in the neck region from here to here, before they go into the lungs, if these rings, when they are moving closely, like side by side with the food pipe, if they will have full circles, concentric rings of cartilage, so these rings are made up of cartilage to give them support. Why a windpipe needs support and a food pipe does not need support? Anyone? An idea? Okay, since no one is speaking, so the windpipe needs support because of the negative air pressure that can be created in the windpipe. So when we inhale, there is a positive pressure in our trachea. So tracheas expand because air is rushing into the lungs. But when we are exhaling, everything is coming out. So there are chances that trachea can collapse because of negative air pressure, and that can create problems, right? So to sustain that, the negative pressure created in the lungs, the bronchus and the trachea have rings, cartilaginous rings that prevent them from collapsing. Food pipe does not need that kind of thing because anyways, you are never going to create negative pressure in the food pipe. You will only be inhaling, you will only be swallowing in food, and food is already food or water. They both comes in bolus and then they go into the stomach. But this part have half rings on trachea because the food pipe, which is just behind it, sometimes need more space if you have swallowed a bigger chunk of food, so that it does not get stuck in your food pipe. Even though even then, if you are swallowing something bigger than food pipe can handle, then you will get a choked, choked throat. If something, if it chokes the larynx, if it chokes the pharynx, which is a common opening for both windpipe and food pipe, people cannot breathe. Okay, and sometimes it's so big that it starts choking from behind the trachea as well. Okay, so to prevent that, to some extent, trachea have half ring, so that if you are swallowing something bigger than you should, still you can try to swallow it and can protect the system. But we will be focusing on the trachea and the respiratory system for today. So after this bronchi goes into the lung, so there are two structures which are not that big probably. There are two structures known as lungs. Okay, so this is your left lung. Similarly, there is a right lung. Now this indentation, so left lung is slightly smaller than the right lung because right here sits your heart. Okay, slightly tilted towards the left. So the left lung, to accommodate for the heart, is slightly bulged in, and there is less, so it becomes shorter than the right lung. Okay, so this is where your heart sits. Okay, and when these bronchi go inside, then they diverge into multiple branches, and then these branches reach everywhere in the lungs like this. Okay, the major ones, and then they keep going, keep diverging, etc. So then they are called bronchioles. Bronchus, bronchioles, sorry, there's no I here. And at the end, very end of these bronchioles inside lung, there are these air sac-like structures. They are called alveoli. Single is called alveolus or alveoli. These are air sac. Okay. So everything has to reach till here. So when air enters from nose, it goes all the way from through the pharynx into the epiglottis, bronchi, larynx, bronchus, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, and it reaches the alveoli. At this alveoli, there are blood capillaries that are all around this alveoli, and from here, the blood loses just by diffusion, the principles of concentration dependent diffusion, because oxygen is more in the atmosphere and less in our blood. In the last chapter, we studied that, remember? Because blood reaches lungs through pulmonary artery or pulmonary vein. Through pulmonary artery, and that contains deoxygenated blood. It comes to the lungs, then through these alveoli, very fine capillaries, through these very fine capillaries, they make connections around these alveoli where diffusion can take place, and CO2 can go back into the lung and oxygen from the lung can come into the blood, and that's how the blood gets oxygenated and then comes back to the heart, which is here, through pulmonary vein, which is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. Okay, and the structure is slightly like this for lungs. Okay, the lungs are bulging towards out like this. Okay, this is because at this very ridge sits a it's something known as diaphragm. Okay, so this is called a diaphragm. So diaphragm is important because you remember it's always dome shaped. Okay, so it actually becomes flattened and comes under pressure whenever we breathe in. So when we breathe in, the lungs tend to expand, and when they expand, they come down and put a pressure on diaphragm, and diaphragm kind of becomes flattened. And when we exhale back, all the air goes out of lung, and lungs then, instead of coming down, like they kind of go up, and the diaphragm again comes back in the dome shaped. Okay, so diaphragm keeps creating a pressure on the lungs. So that's why to breathe in, you need to make efforts. Okay, so breathing in required efforts. You have to breathe in. So try breathing in right now, and you will see that to breathe in, you have to put effort, but to breathe out, it's just like the moment you will leave, air will rush out of your lungs on its own, because this diaphragm is kind of not in a relaxed state. It is in a tensed, stressed, or contracted state, and then it relaxes into its normal dome shape and pushes the air out of the lungs. Okay, now breathing is both voluntary and involuntary process. Most of the time we are doing it involuntarily. We are not even noticing our breath. We are not actively controlling our breathe. But when you are doing breathing exercises, yoga, or you smell something, a perfume or deodorant, then you are actively, voluntarily controlling your breathing in and breathing out. But when you are sleeping, it happens on its own. So this tells us that there has to be a involuntary center that's in our brain that controls the breathing process. Is that correct? So you can control breathing rate on your own at your will, but you cannot control heart rate on your own, right? Through your brain, if you want to increase your heartbeat, can you do that? If you want to increase your breathing rate, you can do that. You can just keep breathing and longer, shorter, deep, all sorts. But can you on your own at your will increase your heart rate? It's beating. No, you have to run or do something that the signal goes to the brain and then it regulates, because I told you in the last lecture that brain is myogenic and it is under the control of some tissues which are intrinsic in the heart called SA node, right? They can only decide the pulse or the beating rate of the heart. So this is about the respiratory system in humans. Is it clear? Now, above these lungs, so there is a membrane called pleural membrane, and there is a pleural fluid. So the word pleural is Plural. Okay, that is associated with the lungs. Covering of the lungs is called the pleural membrane, and between the pleural membrane and the and the beginning of the lung itself, there is a fluid called pleural fluid. So this kind of fluid is present around all our organs. Remember, in the case of heart also, I told you that there is a pericardium and epicardium, pericardium, and there is a space in between where the heart begins and this covering is present, which is filled with cardiac fluid. Do you remember, people?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. In fact, someone is speaking now. Great. So these kind of fluids are present around all our organs, and fluids are very good shock absorbers. Have you ever thought that when we do vigorous exercises like running, playing, fighting, playing sports, so sportsmen just fall, their body thumps against each other, violent games like physically violent games are also being played by sports people. All their organs in the body, it's not like the way we see it in the textbook. So in the textbook, if you see a human body, they will show that you have a heart, two lungs, a kidney, a pair of kidney, a pancreas, liver, all sort here. So when you open the human body, you will not see a body like that. You will not be able to distinguish where is which organ, because every organ is cross-linked with mesenteries, which are muscles that keep the organ attached to the body wall. So none of the organ in our body is just loosely lying around. Otherwise, just one jump and my heart would have come up or down. If I would have jumped very, very suddenly and with a lot of force, my just stomach should just go in down. But it never happens. Everything is very firmly held in place by tissues known as mesenteries, and every organ has its own fluid around it, which even if there is a shock, suppose while playing you fell down and or while playing football, a football came and hit your abdomen region, all of these blows do not, they can also be causing problems if it is too intense, but most of the times they do not, we survive because we have shock absorbing fluid around all our vital organs. So this is also around the lungs, it is also around the heart, liver, pancreas, every organ in short. Okay, and every organ is attached to the body wall through mesenteries. So is this part clear, everyone? Alveoli are, so if you want to write, just read and just you will know. The pharynx is the common opening. Just keep writing certain points. Pharynx, common opening between the food pipe and the windpipe, or where both the nasal and the oral cavities meet. And epiglottis, it is present at the extreme end of the pharynx, and it protects food or water from entering into the larynx. Larynx is also known as voice box. Below larynx starts trachea, which is the windpipe, then bronchus and bronchioles. At the end, it is alveoli. So lung is that kind of a tissue. Everywhere it has alveoli. Okay, Anyone has any doubts? No? No doubts? Okay, very well. So let's go and quickly try to understand the mechanism of respiration or breathing. So mechanism of breathing. Now, though it is something very intuitive and you think you know it, but we have to know a little bit of biophysics associated around it in terms of pressure. Okay. So as I told you that breathing involves two things. One is inhalation or known as inspiration. You are in, you are in, you are inhaling in, so inspiration, and the second is expiration. You are exhaling, so also known as expiration. Okay, so inspiration, air from atmosphere into lungs, and expiration is air from lungs into the atmosphere. Correct? That's simple, that's intuitive. Now in terms of pressure, the movement of this air happens because a gradient of pressure is created between the lungs and the atmosphere. Now let's start from the baseline where we are about to inhale now. So before we start inhaling, what should be the pressure inside the lungs so that we start inhaling? Air moves from high pressure to low pressure regions, just like you know that air gushes from high pressure to low pressure region. So when at a normal, the just after you have exhaled, before you start the new breathing cycle, what is the state of your lungs in terms of pressure? Is it more than the atmospheric pressure, less than the atmospheric pressure, or equal to the atmospheric pressure? After exhalation and before inhalation begins. Quickly, what is the state of your lungs in terms of pressure? So in this case, as no one is answering, so the pressure in the lungs have to be negative or lower than the atmospheric pressure. So we say that intra and inter. Okay, I hope you are not confused now. So intrapulmonary pressure is lower than atmospheric pressure. Okay, this is why we can exhale in, or the air can go inside the lungs from outside. Correct? And then what happens? So after inhalation, what happens? When we inhale, when the air starts gushing in, at one point of time there will be a, so in this case there is a negative pressure, right? We can call it a negative pressure. Negative pressure in lungs, which is into like less than 1 atm, less than 0, so it goes into negative. After inhalation, while you are inhaling, there comes a point when the atmospheric pressure and the pressure in your lungs becomes equal. But we don't, inhalation doesn't stop there. It goes a little above it, so that after inhalation, there is a positive pressure created in the lungs, which will push the diaphragm from a dome shaped structure into a flattened one, which is, so this is the relaxed state of diaphragm when you are not inhaling, and this is a forced phase state of diaphragm. So you need more than atmospheric pressure to do that, and that after inhalation, write down the intrapulmonary pressure is higher than atmospheric pressure. Okay, and we call this state as positive pressure in lungs. So from now onwards, when I will use these terms, you will understand what I'm talking about, correct? Okay. Now, in terms of diaphragm, just write down, inspiration is initiated, or inspiration leads to inhalation or inspiration. So I will use the term inspiration from now onwards, more biologically correct, biological term, than inhaling or inhalation or breathing in. So inspiration leads to contraction of diaphragm. Just remember that. And here one thing to note is diaphragm, when diaphragm contracts, the lungs expand. When diaphragm relaxes, the lungs contracts. Okay. So flattening of diaphragm from a dome shaped state is called contraction relaxation. Contraction relaxation. But it's opposite to lungs. When lungs are contracting, diaphragm is relaxing. When lungs are expanding, diaphragm is contracting. So inspiration leads to contraction of diaphragm, which increases the volume, which increases the volume in the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity is your, where your lungs are present. So this is the neck. This is called cranial cavity or the head. Okay. Then the neck is there. Then from shoulder below till our, where our lungs are, that where the diaphragm is, this is called thorax, the thoracic cavity. Our heart and our lungs are situated in the thoracic cavity. Beneath the thoracic cavity, where the ribs end and there is no bone, okay, in the front, that's called abdominal cavity. In the abdominal cavity, you have your stomach, you have your pancreas, liver, intestines, kidneys, in females, ovaries. So in abdomen also there is upper abdomen, lower abdomen, and where the abdomen ends, from there starts your pelvic region and your legs. Is that clear, everyone? So it increases the volume in the thoracic cavity, which means lungs, and air can be filled. Okay, is that part clear about the pressures? Very good. Now there is one more thing called sternum, which is your center bone. So the ribs are like coming out from sternum. So ribs are attached at 2 points. In front, they are attached in a bone, chest bone, which is called the, it's like tie. It's like a tie from starting from your shoulder bones, and all the ribs are attached. Okay. The last 2 pair of ribs are not attached towards the front, towards, yes, they are not attached towards the front or towards the back. Where are they not attached? I think towards the back they are not attached. So they radiate, but they are free, so they are called floating ribs. So in the front they are attached to the sternum, in the back they are attached to the vertebral column. Is it clear, everyone? So this sternum also moves up and down a bit to accommodate for that increased volume. Okay. Okay, so great. So when diaphragm goes down or contracts, the thoracic cavity or thoracic volume increases. That leads to a negative pressure in the lungs, and air can now rush into the lungs. When diaphragm relaxes, the thoracic volume decreases. That leads to a positive pressure in the lungs and air rushes out of our nostril. This is how we inspire and expire. Okay. I hope this is clear to everyone. Is there any doubt? Please ask. These are technical terms, so if you have any doubts, please get it cleared right now. Otherwise, we will move to other concepts. Is there any doubt? No? Okay. Then the next part deals about, we understood the system, the organs, about the pressures. We understood that when air rushes in, rushes out, what happens to the diaphragm and different. So now we will talk about some respiratory capacities. This is a factual part. You just have to remember certain things. Respiratory capacities or volumes. These are important for you to understand the function of lungs. Just like, remember in case of heart, when heart was pumping, there was something, these volumes were there, like the stroke volume, right? Per beat, how much blood the heart is pumping out was one stroke volume, correct? Here also there are certain volumes. Similarly, in case of lungs, first is called tidal volume, okay, or TV. Remember the short form as well, because questions come in these forms. So if TV is increased or decreased, they often write tidal volume. But what is tidal volume? Tidal volume is the when an organism is normally inhaling or exhaling, a normal breathe, which is not forceful. So you're not forcefully inhaling or forcefully exhaling, just a normal breathe. So volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration is called the tidal volume. Okay, when you are not paying attention to your breath, simply write down volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration. So it's mostly approximately 500 ml of air. Okay, and if I ask you what is the respiratory rate, before we go there, let us write how many times do we respire in a minute. That's respiratory rate per minute. So the beating rate, the heartbeat or the heart beating rate was 72 times, 72 beats per minute. What is the respiratory rate, people? Anyone has any idea? Yes, Devangi says 12. Yes, so it's always a range. It's 12 to 15 times per minute. Now, if in one normal inspiration you can inspire or expire 500 ml of which is the volume of air, how much volume of air can you you will inspire or expire per minute then? Can anyone calculate and tell me quickly with the help of this tidal volume? So the question is, amount of air or volume of air inspired expired per minute in an average healthy human.
6,000.
6000 ml, right? Yes. It will come around 6000 to 8000 ml, which means 6 liters to 8 liters of volume of air we inspire or expire per minute. Okay, a normal human inspire or expires per minute. So this is about a normal one. But what is the capacity of the lungs? Okay, so next we come to see what is the maximum we can inspire or maximum we can expire. So here what's interesting things about lungs start coming up. So we realize that tidal volume is more or less the same. When we are normally inspiring, we will take 500 ml in and we will exhale 500 ml out, a normal, proper, rhythmic breathing. Now there's something called IRV. It's called inspiratory reserve volume. Now there's a term, inspiratory reserve volume. This means if a human, any average human, inspire forcefully to the maximum extent, how much air can you fill? Now that this also varies depending on how healthy someone's lungs are. So people who are continuous or chain smokers, or who due to occupational hazards or due to problems in the lungs or infection in the lungs, are their lungs are not in the best shape or best health, they are IRV, so they might have a tidal volume which is normal. Okay, they might in a normal breathe inhale and exhale 500 ml, because when we are normally inhaling and exhaling, we are not testing the limits of our lungs at all. Our none of our organs, let me tell you, at a normal physiological condition, none of our organ is working at 100% of its capacity. It's not even working at 50%. Sometimes it's even less than that. So our system is developed to take more stress because there will be conditions. So heart is pumping 72 times. That's not the maximum it can beat to. It can go up to double, 140, sometimes 160 also it can beat to. Correct? It can also go low, to 40s, 50s. That's because we will encounter certain situations where we are afraid, we are running, we are sleeping, we are subconscious, and our heart rate can vary. Okay, so in between, it is not the maximum output. You might also have heard that there are two kidneys in a person, and a person can still survive, a healthy person, if it donates one of his or her kidney. You can still survive on one kidney, correct? Have you heard this?
Yes.
What does it mean? It means that both of our kidneys, if we can survive on one kidney, what are two kidneys doing in our body? Because none of the kidney works at its 100%. It's not required. So when we donate one kidney, of course the pressure on the other kidney increases, but that kidney can tolerate it, because anyways it was working at 40% of its capacity. Now it will work at 80%. Still it will manage things very pretty easily. Okay, in the formation of urine. So that's how people can still live comfortably with one kidney, given that that kidney should be healthy. Okay, same is with liver. A liver can be half, not exact half, but the lower lobe of the liver can be donated, and you will do pretty well with the liver. And liver additionally have this property of regeneration, so it will regenerate back. Okay, so you will realize that we set a baseline somewhere, we do not test the limit. Same with lungs. So a person with some problem issues in the lungs, a smoker, can still have the tidal volume which is normal 500 ml, but when it comes to IRV, there you will see a difference, and that will give you an indication of health of the lungs. So inspiratory reserve volume is, write down, the it is a total, oh sorry, it is the additional volume of air, the total additional to this 500 ml, okay, because that you are already doing every time. But if I now ask you consciously that take a deep breathe in, the maximum you can take, go slow but keep breathing till you can take it in. At one point of time your lungs will just stop taking anything in, and that will be your limit. So that will be different for every person. Okay, so additional volume of air, okay, a person can inhale or inspire during a forceful inspiration. During a forceful inspiration, and you'll be surprised that this is around 2500 to 3000 ml. This is the capacity of our, not just the capacity, this is the additional we can take beyond our tidal volume which we normally breathe. So do you see how much optimized our system is? We are just
So,
doing great. Yes,
so
yes.
this is less than the tidal volume, right?
This is less than the,
Ti-
no,
Tidal volume. It's
tidal
6,000
volume
to
is
8.
less. 6000 to 8000 is not tidal volume. Tidal volume is volume of air inspired, expired during one a normal respiration, one cycle. This is tidal volume. This is tidal
Okay,
volume.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, we are summing it. This is a question that can come in 1 minute. How much air we can inspire and expire normally? So if I'm just doing tidal volume, just like the stroke volume, you did there 150 ml into 72, right? For heart, you are doing here 500 ml into 12 to 15, which is that number of times we breathe in a minute. That is the 6000 to 8000. That is not tidal volume. Is it clear, everyone? This is
Yeah.
tidal volume. Yeah, so it is 500 ml, but upon that 500 ml, so Devangi has a question: do PFT test check our IRV? What is PFT? Pulmonary function test, you are saying? I hope you're saying that same. Yes, they check your inspiratory reserve volume. They check your tidal volume as well. They also check your the like capacity, basically, how well your lungs are functioning. Okay. Yes. Cool. So inspiratory reserve volume is somewhere around 5 to 6 times more. So can you see how much optimized our system is? Our lungs are. So we always breathe 1/5 to 1/6. We can breathe when we are not noticing and we are breathing normally. That is all we need, and we are doing good and okay. But breathing exercises are good because they give you more oxygen. So every morning and evening, if you're doing yoga or breathing exercises, that's good for you. Now you can understand why it's good for you, correct? People think, hey, what are we doing? We're just breathing. No, so throughout the day we breathe. What is interesting about doing breathing exercises? It's because you are breathing more for that given time, and your brain is getting more oxygen, your body is getting more oxygen to do certain things better. Okay. Similarly, just like inspiratory reserve volume, there is something called expiratory reserve volume. The definition remains same, which is additional volume of air expired during a forceful expiration. But the number now changes. We can inhale more than we can expire, even if we want to expire. We cannot expire everything from our lungs. Even how much forcefully we try, we can never empty our lungs completely. So expiratory reserve volume is around 1000 ml to 1100 ml only. So if you add this, 500 plus 1100 is 1600 ml, and 3000 to 500 is 3500 ml. So it's clear that whatever we can inhale, around just the half of it we can exhale even after a forceful expiration. Now, can anyone tell me why do you think we cannot empty the lungs?
The lungs will collapse.
Yes, correct. So there will be, so when we are expiring, there is a negative pressure in the lungs, but we do not want to empty the lungs, because in that case, all the alveoli will just collapse and can get damaged in that collapsing process. Even bronchioles and bronchi can just collapse and get damaged, and that could be irreversible injury, and tissues on the lungs can die. So we always are left with something known as residual volume in the lung. So this is IRV. Please keep noting the short form also. TV, IRV, ERV, and then residual volume, which is RV. Simple. We always have a residual volume in our lungs, even after a forceful expiration. So write down, it is a remaining air in the lungs even after a forceful expiration. And this protects the lungs. This keeps the lung away from collapsing on its own. Okay, does that make sense, everyone? So sorry. Okay, so this, how much could be the residual volume? Can anyone tell me? Average. It's easy to find residual volume. What you have to do?
We can minus 2500 minus 1000.
1000, right? 1000, 1100. So it ranges somewhere around 1100 ml to 1300 ml. Correct? This is your residual volume of a normal average healthy human in the lungs at any given time. So at any given time, you have around 1.3 liters of air in your lungs always. Okay, that prevents your lungs. That's called the residual volume. Now these four are the main parameters, and now you just have to add and subtract from these four to find out other parameters, which are called pulmonary capacity. So these were volumes. All the names were volumes: tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, residual volume. Now we will use these volume parameters to find out pulmonary capacities. The first one is your inspiratory capacity. Inspiratory capacity. Capacity means the total which is possible. So inspiratory capacity means total volume of air that any person can inspire. Okay, in one after a normal expiration. Remember, after a normal expiration, write down this total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. So that also varies. If you are doing a forceful expiration, of course you will be able to inspire more, but inspiratory capacity is just about inspiration. It has nothing to do with expiration. So expiration has to be normal. So after a normal expiration, if you have to find out the inspiratory capacity, which of the above two will you add? So inspiratory capacity is called IC. Which of the above two will you add? Quickly.
TV plus IR.
TV plus IRV, correct? Perfect. So what will be your inspiratory capacity? Around TV 500 plus IRV, let's say 2500. So it's around 3000 to 4000 ml is your inspiratory capacity. Everyone is clear with this? How do we find that? Same is expiratory capacity. Now let's define it. Write down the total volume of air a person can expire after a normal inspiration. When we talk about expiratory capacity, we will keep the inspiration normal. So the total amount of air a person can expire after a normal inspiration. So what are you going to add here? You're going to add TV plus ERV. So which will be bigger, inspiratory capacity or expiratory capacity?
Inspiratory.
Yes, because this will be around 1500 ml to 1600 ml. Okay, less than the inspiratory capacity. Now there's something called, again, FRC, functional residual capacity. Functional residual capacity. I should have told you vital capacity first, but okay, it's fine. Functional residual capacity, as the term suggests, it is the volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. Okay, after a normal expiration, not after a normal inspiration, just expiration. So what will you add to find a functional residual capacity? FRC. Of course, residual volume plus ERV. Expiratory, so what is ERV? Expiratory reserve volume. So ERV plus RV, residual volume plus expiratory reserve volume. And what it is going to be around? ERV plus RV. 1000 plus 1100. It's going to be around 2200 to 2400 ml. This is the range, correct? This is the functional residual capacity. Yeah, but Devang is asking, but ERV is exhaled, not left in the lungs. How did we define ERV? Additional volume of air that a person can expire by a forcible expiration, which means it was in the lungs. That's why you can expire it. So don't get confused. Just because it has expiratory reserve volume, it does not mean it's already out of the lungs. It is in the lungs. That's how you can expire it. Do you understand, Devangi? That's a very common doubt, and it's a good point that you raised. But it is in the lungs after inspiration. That's why you can inspire it. Do you understand? That is the additional volume that you can expire above the tidal volume. Okay, so it's in the lungs. That's why we can minus that's why we will add ERV plus PV. Yes, sorry, ERV plus RV to do functional residual capacity. Okay, don't get confused. It's just simple, pure logic. Okay, that's great. Now there's something called vital capacity. Okay, So I should have told you this first, but okay, you will understand. Vital capacity is simply the maximum volume of air a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. Okay. Or the maximum volume of air a person can breathe out after a forced inspiration. What we have done before in inspiratory capacity and expiratory capacity is when we are finding inspiratory capacity, we are taking expiration as normal. When we are finding expiratory capacity, we are keeping inspiration as normal. Vital capacity is after a forceful expiration. You try to empty your lungs as much as you can, and then how much you can breathe in, or you try to breathe in as much as you can, and then how much will you expire out. That's called vital capacity. So it will be different in terms of breathing in and breathing out, correct? But how can I just define it in one formula? What should I add so that I'll get vital capacity? Of course ERV will be there, right?
EC.
ERV sorry,
EC plus IR.
yes, ERV plus IRV will be there, of course, but we will add TV, tidal volume, in that, because TV plus ERV is anyways EC. So I can also write EC plus IRV, correct? EC is TV plus ERV. So we have TV here, we have ERV here. If I add it together, I can also say that EC plus IRV is the vital capacity. Both are true. Do you understand why? Iram, Chania, Devangi, is it clear?
Yes, clear.
It seems to be very intuitive and simple thing, but I have seen students committing silly mistakes in finding these capacities and losing marks. So that's why I'm spending some time here. And then the final one is total lung capacity. Now I think it's simplest. If you have to find total lung capacity, what will you do? TLC. So it is the total, write down. For vital capacity, did you write down the point? Write down for total lung capacity. It is the total volume of air accommodated, or that can be contained inside the lungs at the end of or after a forceful inspiration. Which means how much can you store in your lungs? Simple. Is total lung capacity. So how much can you store in lungs? How will you find this out? Of course, it will have TV, tidal volume, which was already there. Now let's build upon it. Upon TV, we can do RV because that never leaves the lung. TV is what we normally keep doing, putting in. RV never leaves the lung, so it has to be there. Plus
ERV.
ERV, correct. Okay. There's another way to write it. No, we also have to add here. If you're adding ERV, there has to be IRV as well, right? RV, ERV, TV, and IRV. Or I can say in simpler terms, the vital capacity, which is VC, this one, the above one, plus residual volume, which never leaves the lung. Both of these are true. Okay. Is this part clear, people? Just look at these things. Seem to be simple, but they are sometimes very confusing. Just look at the capacities and the volumes both, and let me know if you have any doubt. I'm giving you a couple of minutes, okay? Okay. Is there any doubts? Anything that you are not clear with? Iram, Chania, and Devangi? Please do ask if there is anything. Yes, there is one thing in the chat. Devang is saying, please tell VC again why VC again, okay, why it has both IRV and ERV along with TV. Okay, correct. So let's go to VC again. So VC is vital capacity, Devangi. Okay, as I told you, I can totally understand that things which seems to be very simple and straightforward can be confusing also, because just for the fact that we are adding and subtracting multiple things here. So vital capacity is the maximum volume of air. Okay, if you have not written down, please write down. It is the maximum volume of air that a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. Okay, so if you forcefully expire, that is whatever you can expire forcefully is your ERV, right? Correct. So that's why we start with ERV. So whatever we expired forcefully, first we will inhale that back. Then on the top of it, we can TV, so we can anyway inspire, because that's the tidal volume which we normally do inspire. And plus on the top of it, we can do IRV as well, which is a forced full inspiration. So after a forced full expiration, we have removed three things from the lung: TV, of course, ERV, and IRV. So we have to add all these three back to get back the maximum vital capacity. And since ERV plus TV is also called EC, which is expiratory capacity, then we can also simply do EC plus IRV. Make sense, Devangi? Please sit with these things and look at it once again and ask someone in your family member to just quiz you on that. Okay, what is EC? And then you can just say it with fingertip on your finger. It should be on your fingertips, because if you understand the logic, still it will take some time for you to getting used to these terms. Okay, Devangi, got it? Yes, great. So you understood the logic. That was my motive in the class, and it is fulfilled. So things done. Now, as I told you, this is comparatively a smaller chapter, but it has some components which can be really confusing. So I would like all of you to go back, revise this part, get it set in your head. And in the next class, we will be focusing on today we focused more on facts. So what is where, what is called what. So this was the factual part. All you needed to know to understand the breathing mechanism is done. In the next class, we will do the concept heavy. Next class will be concept heavy, where I will be using these terms and you should know these terms. So we will be talking about the transport, actually how this pressure helps in transportation of these gases and what factors affect the transportation of the gases. Mainly we will focus on two gases, which are the respiratory gases, O2 and CO2. So in the next chapter, in the next class, this chapter might come towards end, or we might need just one more extra class. But if you will be coming prepared with this, it will be easier. Okay, everyone, is there any doubt you want to ask? So I would declare the class here only, because from here onwards the conceptual part begins. Anything you want to ask in today's class?
So,
Yes, Iram. Yeah.
sir, I have a doubt regarding the previous chapter. I didn't ask you the starting.
Okay, no problem. You can ask me now. It
Yeah.
means body fluids, right? I can go
Yeah,
back to
body
this
fluids.
chapter. Yes, which part you had a doubt in? Let's go back to there.
It's related with heart attack.
Heart. Okay, yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so a person gets heart attack due to the clotting in the coronary artery, and it leads to myocardial infarction. Yeah,
Yes.
that's understood. But it said that tension also causes heart attack, right?
Yes, stress or tension.
Stress or tension. But
Mhm.
that won't lead to clot in the heart, right? So how
Yes,
can that?
that won't. So, so there are three terms that I will first tell you about. People are often confused. They think heart attack is just anything. So when I use the word heart attack, what do I mean? The heart is attacked by something, right? It means there is an attack on the heart, or heart underwent a attack situation. Heart attack is biologically called by cardiac arrest. That's a better term, I think, because it tells more about what's happening to the heart. Heart stops. In heart attack, heart stops, cardiac arrest. One of the reason of heart attack or cardiac arrest is myocardial infarction, which you said. Myo means
Muscle?
muscle. Kiska muscle?
Heart.
Heart ka, myocardial. So muscle of the cardiac. Infarction is a injury or a death that happens due to non-availability of oxygen. So without oxygen, heart tissues or any tissue of the body will start dying. It's called infarction. When it happens in heart, we call it myocardial infarction. It can happen in the brain. We call it brain infarction, pancreatic infarction. Correct?
It's stroke, right?
It's a stroke means, yes. So stroke means, again, stroke, we say that heart underwent stroke because some major muscles. Now let's say the muscles that died due to infarction, it is also, there is another term which is not in your textbook. It is called ischemic injury. Again, it means injury or death of the tissue due to no availability of oxygen. So if clot happens, there are more chances that blood will not reach to any particular region of the heart. You know that heart also needs the same blood that it is pumping out, filled with oxygen to survive. Heart muscles also need to eat something, no, to continuously keep working. So the blood that leaves the heart also goes to different parts of the heart itself to make the heart muscle sustain. If there is a clot in those arteries or veins, it will lead to death of that tissue, that localized tissue, due to non-availability of oxygen. So that is called infarction, when the clot is there and does not allow blood to go to that part. Let's say if the SA node or the AV node started dying, then what happened is you will get into a stroke condition or a arrest condition. So heart will stop beating because the tissues responsible are now dead. That's called cardiac arrest or heart attack. It can also happen, heart can also stop working suddenly due to shock. That's why I'd say that older people have weaker hearts. You will always find this. So people with weak hearts should not look at this video. Why? Because they will suddenly go into a state of shock. They will be, so to older people, we should not try to surprise them, because maybe they'll not be surprised, they will go into a shock. Their physiology is not strong enough to hold certain kind of surprises, or suddenly just blow into their ears or clap very loudly. They can just go into that zone where the heart got into a state of shock, and due to fear it stopped working. Tension or stress does the same thing. When a person is stressed or tension, the brain continuously secretes certain molecules that make the physiology. Brain is using more and more and more and more of oxygen when you are stressed or you're in a tension condition. So heart needs to pump more, or sometimes heart pumps less, and feels a pain. Sometimes stressed people or depressed people or people in grief, when we lose someone very close to death, we often feel heaviness in our chest, right? That's also a thing. So we have to overcome grief. It Prolonged grief period is not good for your heart's health. So do you understand? Stress works completely differently. It will not lead to clotting or things like that, but it can still kill heart by hyper exciting it, or making it go more and more gloomy if you are depressed. Do you understand? So anxiety and depression,
Yeah.
opposite. And myocardial infarction is a physiological condition where something clogged into the veins or the arteries and the tissues of heart died. But all of it combined can kill a heart or make the heart stop all of a sudden. That's heart attack in general, the broader term. Is that clear? Iram?
Yes. But
Yeah.
this ischemic injury can be cured, right?
Ischemic injury, any kind of injury for heart cannot be cured because human heart